Hey everybody, and welcome back to Coffin Talk Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And for some reason, I am staring at my teeth while I am talking to you, and that's why I don't like recording videos that are on self, but I cannot help it. So if my eyes keep looking down, I'm just looking at my teeth. I'm not judging them. I'm not saying they're good or bad. I'm not like critical. I just, for some reason, the white caught my attention. My eyes are also white. Why am I doing this? I don't know. But this is the introduction to Coffin Talk, and this episode is very special to me because our guest is Justin Tate, and Justin started the Red Sands Writers Circle. I'm not sure how many years ago. I know that I found it, I think 8 years ago, and it was a life-changing moment for me because it has developed into one of the largest meetup communities in the Phoenix metro area. We have 6 million people living here, and we have thousands of members. And when I say we, it's because I'm a proud member of like some of the groups, but Justin is the person who started it all. He still runs several of them, and he still runs the whole organization. If I did something out of line, he would kick me out, I'm sure. I'm laughing because that would never happen because I respect him and I respect the groups. But the point I'm trying to make is he's a very important person, not just to me, but to this giant community. And I finally got him to come in for an interview. I have been asking him for years. He's not shy, but he's like reticent to talk about himself. But he really opens up in this interview, and I'm really proud to present him to you. And I know hopefully a bunch of Red Sands people are going to watch this one because you should get to know Justin better. We talk about his job as a literary historian. We talk about his experiences growing up and getting into Gothic literature. We talk about the future of reading, and we talk about metaphysics and what you think is going to happen when you die. So it's a great interview. I give it my seal of approval, and I'm really excited to present to you Justin Tate on Coffin Talk. I don't think there's anything else to add. Oh, this is probably going to come out after New Year's, but I always tell you when I'm recording them. So I'm recording this like a day or two before the New Year. So if I didn't wish it to you on the last episode or the one before that, Happy New Year. It's 2026 when you're listening to this or watching it. And I hope it's a good one. And if it's not a good one, I hope it's an interesting one. No, I don't know. That's that Chinese curse. Do we really want the Chinese curse? I don't know. People like Chinese food. They like fortune cookies. Chinese curse. Maybe it's like rule of threes. What am I talking about? Am I looking at my teeth still? Gosh, get a grip on life, Mike. All right, I'll see you guys. Bye. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Coffin Talk Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And this week we have someone who I always call the godfather of my writing group, and I'm sure he does not like that title because he is the least egotistical person I've probably like ever met in my adult life. But our guest is Justin Tate. He lives in Apache Junction, which is a offshoot of the Phoenix larger area. But as I said, he started honestly the greatest development of my post-30s life, which is Red Sands Writers Group. There will be links for that. We're going to talk about it in the interview, so I will not belabor the point. But I would also like to introduce him appropriately as a lot more than just the founder and current and hopefully forever operator of Red Sands Writing Group. He's a biographer and a literary historian, and he specializes in Gothic studies and pulp paperback fiction. His essays have been published in Pearson and Edinburgh University Press. He's also, as I mentioned, the founder of the Red Sands Writers Circle, a popular creative writing workshop in Mesa, Arizona. And when I say popular, I mean it is like the destination for writers here. It's amazing the collective you, I'm now talking to, Justin, have built here. It changed my life, and we'll talk about that a little bit, maybe not a lot, or maybe it'll take up most of the interview. But before we do that, I would like to ask you our 3 standard questions. How old are you? Where did you grow up? And what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
Yeah, hey Mike, thanks a lot for having me on the show. Big fan. I'm 36, which makes me a millennial, and oh wait, I almost forgot. What's the third
No,
question?
you're good. Where'd you grow up?
Oh yeah, I grew up in Oklahoma. I have lived in Arizona, I think over 15 years now. So there's going to be an awkward point where I've lived here longer. That I moved here when I was 22, so soon enough I will be here longer. So I don't know where I'll be from at that point. I guess I could just decide.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. My brother did that quite a few years ago, but he lived in New York for more than half his life now. So even though we're both from California, he doesn't even talk about California. And actually, speaking of which, I know you got an MFA, so that means you got an undergrad degree. Where did you do your undergraduate studies?
Yeah. So I did do undergrad at University of Oklahoma. So it
Okay.
was right after I graduated college that I skipped over to Arizona, and I love it. I love both places, honestly, but I feel Arizona is probably more my home at this point.
That's cool. That's awesome. And only because I went to like a big, like famous college, meaning like the state school that everyone talks about. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, which is Pennsylvania's, like, what was the University of Oklahoma is like super famous. I mean, it's just like a big sports school, a big school, like all that. Did you like enjoy that experience? Was it nice or was it different or anything?
Yeah, so I was an English major, and so we had a different experience at University of Oklahoma than the football team. Uh, for example, the football stadium is this multi-million dollar glorious thing. In the English building, we didn't have doors on our bathrooms. We had a shower curtain on the door. So I had a great experience. The faculty, the academics there were incredible. I have nothing to complain about, but you definitely felt not sporty whenever you went into the liberal arts side of things.
That's awesome. Cool. I'm glad I asked because I've always just been curious about that. And like, I just think it's pretty famous, Oklahoma, for a couple things, not a lot, but football, Mickey Mantle. What am I missing? Dust Bowl. I don't know. Anyway, we will now shift the interview into much more prominent and important things in both of our lives. You're a biographer and a literary historian. Are you the two things? Are they synonymous? Are they very separate? How would you describe and explain both?
Yeah. They are kind of interconnected, and I don't know if literary historian is a real thing, by the way, or not. Is what is what I call myself, and the best way I can explain it is when I read a book. Of course, I'm interested in the entertainment value and the characters and all that, but what I'm more interested in is how that book is a time capsule of the era it was published or when it was written or things like that. So I think I'm also a biographer in that I tend to focus pretty exclusively on people who were writers or were are writers. And so I would also call myself a literary biographer because a lot of what I do is um, think about how the fiction or nonfiction or whatever literary product these people left behind, how does that reflect their personal life? What were they going through at the time? What was the world going through at the time? So I do think they're very connected. You have to do a lot of studying of real history to be a literary historian to know, like, get what they're interacting with. But once it's kind of fun. It's kind of like looking at history through Saturday Night Live or something
Oh,
because it's
cool.
it's fiction, so it's exaggerated, it's dramatic. But in a lot of ways, I feel it actually is a better reflection of the anxieties people feel because something could be fairly minor or major in the real world, but how that impacts people as it manifests through fiction is very unique and different. And so they're all interlinked, but hopefully that makes sense because I don't
No,
know if
yeah.
that's a real title or not.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and it brought up like 5,000 questions I
Okay,
want to ask. I'll
good.
try to hone them down to a few. My first question would be, I'm not a historian, but I do, because of my job of book indexing, I happen to do a lot of like history books. And something I've become aware of as I do more and more of them is that there's a lot of rhyming and repetition in history. That famous quote and all that. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm more curious because you're doing it through like other lenses, and as you said, the Saturday Night Live. It's a great line. I love that. Do you feel like the current times are somewhat of like a repetition or a rhyme of a different historical period you've studied, or do they feel truly unique?
Yeah. I mean, there's always unique things, but it is I don't know if it's frustrating or if it's relieving to, like, because I'm spending a lot of times in like the 1930s and 40s and 50s, and to know that we have gone through hard times before. Actually, I mean, I watch like Great Depression documentaries to make me feel better because it's like, oh, my life is actually not so bad, right? So there is a certain repeat, yes, that can happen, and it's often kind of jarring to see people like complain about the politics of the 1930s that are exactly as they are in the 2020s and soon to be 2030s. So I don't know. Sometimes I feel relieved by that, knowing if we can get through it once, we can get through it again. Other times it's like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to change? Are these problems ever going to go away?
Yeah, I wondered the same thing, and I don't think we'll
Yeah.
answer it. But this podcast actually is sort of an attempt to broach that subject at the very least, which is, what is eternal, what's not eternal, do we live forever? And we will get into that and when we get into the metaphysical portion of the podcast. But I'm
Sure.
not done with history and literary historian questions. Have you done most of your studies on literature that was published or written in the United States alone, or do you do all sorts of different cultures?
Yeah, so I'm not against my academic background is actually in Gothic studies, so that is a very heavily European genre. Certainly, there's American Gothic as well, but Horace Walpole wrote the first book to ever call itself Gothic. The Castle of Otranto, Anne Radcliffe, Matthew Lewis. These are all the big names in Gothics, and those are all very European. So I do know a lot about like 1790s European like culture wars and religion and all that, just out of that. But what I am focusing probably primarily now is more American authors from the pulp, like sexual revolution, civil rights, 1960s, 70s era. Pulp fiction is really fascinating because they were produced quickly and almost like magazines. I mean, they would pump them out and then they would be gone and they'd pump out more, and they were often very much interacting with whatever the hot button thing is at the time. So as a literary historian, they're very fascinating to see like how do people transform anxieties about Nixon into a erotic thriller or whatever, right? That the pulp thing was. And so and they absolutely do, and that it's intentional. It would have been for the audience at the time, but you have to kind of read between the lines a little bit now since it's been a minute.
That's cool. There's a weird like pun on tricky dick going in my head through.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and titles have there has been titles that make puns on that as well.
Yeah. And as far as like Gothic goes, am I incorrect or correct? Is Wuthering Heights an example of Gothic?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
One of
cool.
the yeah, absolutely, and that's
Okay.
the movie's coming out soon. I
Wow.
think Gothic often emerges during times of great civil unrest as well, because they're often set like 100 years in the past. Even the like 1700s books, they were set in the 1600s. They would
Yeah.
set them in the past. They would be all very domestic, but usually in like a big castle or whatever. So you didn't really have a lot of outside factors being an issue. So I'm not surprised to see like Frankenstein came out, the movie of that recently, Wuthering Heights. All these are kind of coming back again, and a lot of new authors are also writing in Gothic, intentionally evoking that too. So not surprised to see it coming back around.
That's awesome. And it's funny because as a child, I was obsessed with like 80s horror movies and stuff. And so obviously I liked the Gothic without even knowing that term or anything like that. But it almost seems like America has really like taken the torch of the Gothic tradition. I mean, I'm just waxing intellectual here, but that does strike me as interesting because when you mentioned the Pulp Fiction thing, it also reminded me of L. Ron Hubbard, the creator of Scientology. I believe he was the most prolific Pulp Fiction author of all time. I'm that might be apocryphal, but I'm pretty sure that's true. Do you know anything about him? Have you read any of his?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, he started as a pulp writer. He was
Yeah.
writing paperback fiction, fantasy, horror, like all kinds of fun stuff. I know he was very prolific. I know a lot of the pulp writers they could churn him out. So I've talked to people who have published. I don't know about from the actual pulp era, but like in their lifetime, like over 200 books, and I think he's up there too. So I wouldn't surprise me if he's got the world record on that.
That's awesome. And then when you're hanging out with fellow Pulp Fiction experts and you guys are at like your conventions or whatever you guys do, which this is all in my head, that my fantasy that you have one. What is like what is like the Star Wars of Gothic? Like what's like the base, like, oh come on, like let's not talk about that anymore. And then I also want to know what is like your like dark horse favorite candidate of like Pulp Fiction. So as a writer or a book, I don't know which you'd prefer to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Jane Eyre is probably the most influential Gothic book maybe ever, because it's been rehashed so many times. It's got a governess who shows up at this rich man's castle. They start to kind of fall in love, but he's got a real big anger issue, and he's kind of scarred and brooding. And he also has his first wife locked up in the attic. So like this is all this formula has been probably remade the most of all the Gothic formulas, in my opinion. I still love talking about it. I don't know if it's played out. I know in Gothic circles we haven't been like, oh gosh, Jane Eyre again. We're still into Jane Eyre, but that would be the one I would say is the biggest.
Uh-huh.
And then you kind of
like what's your favorite, like if you're sitting around a table and like, you know, like if we're all talking about punk rock, you know, everyone's gonna be like, yeah, the Ramones are good, but then you're gonna be like, oh well, my favorite is like, and you're gonna pull out the special LP you have. So I'm just curious, do you have something like that?
Hipster Gothic,
yeah.
Absolutely. So I really like Zafloya. This is a book that nobody's really talking about. It just recently got reprinted, like, and this came out in like the early 1800s. It's actually kind of like a feminist reimagining of the monk. The monk is, if you're interested in horror too, monk is considered like the first Gothic / horror book. And so in that book, a monk like sells his soul to the devil so that he can have conquests with women all across Madrid. So eventually the devil gets his due and all that fun stuff. But the other one is kind of the reverse, where a woman ends up selling her soul to the devil to have her way with men. And so it's a very fascinating, it's not like a perfect book, but it is juicy as can be, and probably as well written as The Monk, but nobody really talks about it. So that would be, it's by Charlotte Dacker is her name. But yeah, Zafloya.
Awesome. And I should mention, I should have mentioned at the top of the interview, in the notes section, there will be a link tree to find out more about Justin and to read some of his works. I have, before I knew I was going to even interview, I read a couple of your scholarly articles, and I've also read some of your other books on Amazon. First of all, you're awesome. You know, I think that, but I just want to, so for people listening, you know, Justin and I are friends, so it's hard to like compliment him live on a show to make sure you guys understand that I'm a huge fan of his. But his scholarly articles, your scholarly articles, are like really impressive to me, because I also got an MFA, and you know, I had to read those for a living. Like that was like 2 years of my life, and also undergrad like you, I was literature. So not only are you awesome at it, but something you do that is rare and also hard to do, especially if you want to get published, is you put a sense of humor into them. You definitely have like a great attitude, especially about like the feminist civil rights and all that kind of stuff that was going on. I appreciate that deeply, as you know, a fellow a patriot of civil rights, if that makes sense to people listening. So I'm curious, when you're going about that and when you're doing those kind of projects, have you ever been like rejected because of your sense of humor about it? Has that ever been an issue? Do you sometimes have to like tone it down, or also just based on the content of the books, like these are smut porn, these aren't literature? You know, do you ever encounter any of that?
Hi everybody, this is Mike Oppenheim, the host of Coffin Talk, the show you're currently listening to, and I'm interrupting to ask you if you would mind doing me a favor and subscribing to my online publication called You Are Here on Substack. It features weekly essays. I also have fiction, and of course there are links to the podcast and all the bonus episodes. It's completely free, and I would love your support, so please head over to mikeyop.com, that's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up today. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that I think about a lot. So the probably the biggest article I've had published was in Gothic Studies, and that's kind of like the most prestigious journal for Gothic literature. But I was almost exclusively on a book that was at the time published as pornography. It was a novel actually about a gay man who goes into a castle, and it's basically a gay Jane Eyre.
Wow.
But this was 1969, and really no mainstream publisher was going to print that. So he had to work with the so-called porno publishers who were doing the kind of behind the black curtain books at the time. And it was tough because academia doesn't appreciate this genre as much. And so I really had to work, I think, pretty hard in justifying the literary value of the book. Now, fortunately, the author, Peter Tuesday Hughes, does an amazing job, and his prose is fabulous. You would be shocked to find it behind the black curtain because it's written as well as anybody else. So he makes it kind of easier, but I do have to have a big section where I kind of explain like these are historically significant because of X, Y, and Z. But I still have fun with it. It is a fun book. There's, sex jokes, there's stuff throughout it. And so I was worried that they wouldn't publish it for that reason. Fortunately, they did. There are, I also publish on spookybookie.com, which is kind of it's a more casual academic space where that's definitely, a little bit of humor is totally fine. And so that's where, if I'm really kind of being a little more zany with my essay on an old book or something like that, that's probably going to be a better home for me. But I am working on another one right now that is very comedic, and I'm expecting to be rejected, to be honest. I'm going to try to put it together, but I won't be offended if so. I totally get that academia has a different tone. I personally think that academic writing doesn't have to be dry and boring, and it's very important to me to be the person who's going to push against that. And so I'm happy to try my best. We'll see what happens with it. But if not, maybe Spooky Bookie or somebody else will want to publish it.
That's awesome. When I was an undergrad, my favorite three professors all took me aside as I was graduating, and they said, "You write the most entertaining literature papers of like our current student body. We love what you do. You're very talented. We're not going to recommend you for a PhD program. They will not put up with any of this, and they won't like it. They're like, instead, you should get an MFA and be a writer." So it was like cool because that's part of why I ask, is that I see you doing something I wasn't able to pull off, and I'm not jealous. It's the opposite. It's that I desperately wish academia would just take itself down a notch. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like that ivory tower attitude is precisely why people call it the ivory tower. It's why people are dismissive of it. And right now, there's like a political attack on academia, and I'm not a fan of that, obviously, since I come from it and defend it. But I also believe that all of us would be better off not calling pulp fiction or you know what I mean? Like these degrading terms for different people's art forms is sad to me. I want to shift into the metaphysical side of the podcast by asking, my assumptions about Oklahoma are that it's a pretty religious place, that it's steeped in good old fashioned American Christianity, which of course comes from the Puritans from Boston. And so that's, a huge part of our country. So that's a main reason that these books were banned or had to be written in the first place and published in other places. I'm curious, were you raised religiously, and or was the society of Oklahoma pushing for religion in a way that made you embrace these kind of books and this kind of spirit of freedom and real expression?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there definitely might. I haven't psychoanalyzed myself enough to know if that's true or not, but I could definitely see that. So yeah, Oklahoma is the Bible Belt. There's more churches than gas stations, and it's that didn't necessarily bother me. I actually, as a historian, it's very helpful because it is a little bit like going back in time when you go back there. So when I'm reading about the 30s and 40s and 50s, I have zero trouble imagining that experience, because oh, that's kind of like my 1990s or my early 2000s. So there probably is a side of me that because it was a culture where you didn't talk about anything taboo. It's that is something to be avoided, at all costs, at least in most social circles. And that kind of drove me crazy. I'm like, why can't we talk about this? Why can't we enjoy that? So I think I get probably an inordinate amount of pleasure from reading books that push back against and talk about, the wildest things. And pulp, there's nothing more wild than 1960s and 70s pulp. It's insane. And I think I appreciate that. And I think that's exactly what they were doing at the time, because coming out of the 50s was the same idea, right? You didn't talk about any of this stuff. The 60s comes along, and now we talk about everything. Possibly to a fault. I think sometimes they even go too far, but making change, you got to test that limit. And so they do. And in the later 70s, it kind of backs off again a little bit. And then, it keeps going in waves. But I agree with that premise, that I am drawn to this genre and to this type of research because I appreciate what the authors were accomplishing. And I think I know firsthand how daring and trailblazing what they were doing were. A lot of them had to write under pseudonyms because, it's like Peter Tuesday Hughes, he would have been possibly thrown in jail for writing a book about a gay Gothic romance or whatever, right? So, they really were pushing boundaries even more than they are now, but still very significantly.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, it's insane. I grew up in the opposite. I grew up in Berkeley, California. So like I can't imagine the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Like to me, it is just like mind blowing to read about McCarthyism, to read about any of this, and even just that states had like modern day Sodom laws and like things like that. Just it blows my mind. Like
Right,
I grew up
right.
with like naked people riding the bus, like just to give
Yeah, yeah. So
perspective to
yeah,
people.
very much the opposite for me,
Yeah.
which as at the time as a kid, it probably drove me crazy. But now I'm like, this is really cool because I can actually really relate to this side of history.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so what about like do you have a spiritual or religious foundation that you still hold on to now? Like what are your approaches to that, if any?
Yeah, yeah. So I was raised Baptist, which I think there's some good stuff in religion. I don't necessarily side with organized religion as general, especially as a literary analysis type person, because I know how significant interpretation matters. And so any organized interpretation of religious texts or things like that, I think get kind of mired in um, certain politics at the time or whatever. And we're talking like hundreds of years back. So I think having a spiritual connection that is personal to you is the most important thing. And I would say I still have aspects of that. It just probably doesn't follow any doctrine that's out there.
That's awesome. I appreciate that wholeheartedly. And then, so of course, the only other question we ask every single guest is, what do you think happens when you die? So, do you think about that? And what do you think happens when you
Yeah,
do
I
think about
actually
it?
know the answer to this question.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, I
Finally.
might be the first one who knows the answer. Your biography ends. Yes, it's not metaphysical enough. We can get into that too, and I do have thoughts on that.
No, that's
But
cool. I like it. I like it.
I think I'm a biographer, and I do think about my own life. I don't think anyone's going to write a biography about my life. I don't think I would write a biography about my life because it's not very entertaining. But I do think about my life as a biography, and I know we're in this writing group, and I have like a little shelf of all the books that have been published out of my writing group, and I some of those I were directly involved with helping edit or giving feedback. I know many of them you have been into, and so I do think about even these small things that are maybe in my life that leave a little bit of a legacy, like a biography might. And so I live my life thinking more about that, and I think that's important, even if you're very religious, like if you're picturing heaven, because heaven, my understanding is revisit with your loved ones and everybody's there. But if you were a jerk and had a bad biography in your life, like, I don't know, like, do people just shun you as well? Does Shakespeare have a line of people waiting to talk with him? Like, I don't know how that would work out, but it would seem, even if you're thinking more about ever after and eternal life, having making a good life for yourself, being a good person, doing things that change lives in the here and now, to me is the most important part.
That was an incredible answer. No one's ever offered anything close to that, or maybe close. But what it really got me thinking about is you're totally right. You wouldn't have to separate heaven from hell. Hell would be your legacy is permanent in heaven and you can't change it. And heaven would be your legacy is permanent in heaven and you can't change it. Yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
incredible. That's really
So I
cool.
don't. Maybe we get to write a new legacy. Who
Yeah.
knows? After that, I will say, as a biographer, to get into the metaphysical, and
Mhm.
I've talked with other biographers who feel the same way. Um, but there have been weird times where, like, trying to find a source or something like that, where I have felt there to be some type of supernatural intervention, and I've had other people who felt the same way, where they would hear like dream or maybe even like see the person they're writing about, and they would say, look in this area, like, it was a very like Dickens almost. And sure enough, they would find the clue, and maybe it's the subconscious manifesting, I don't know. But I often feel like I can't really go into it right now, but I'm working on a very long biography right now that's been like years in the work. And there have been many, many moments where, like, if this one thing or these multiple series of things hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have found this trove of information, and this thing would never be possible. And so I do feel like she's out there kind of guiding me a little bit. So if you are thinking about kind of, I don't know what that looks like, maybe we still have some ability to influence the world we leave behind afterwards. But I have some evidence of that based on my own experience, if anybody's curious about that.
That's really cool. And I like that there's a little bit of a mystery to this long-term project you're doing. I'm assuming two things. One, you don't want someone else to take your idea and do it. And two, I know you well enough to know that you don't like to over talk about something until it's completed, which I respect. They say that actually to all writers, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, I think there's some truth to that. You'll have to have me back on the show once the book's done, and
Awesome.
we can talk all about it. But and this is true. I do a lot of more microbiographies as well, where it's kind of just bringing up. I really work exclusively with people who are not famous currently. They've their books are out of print or they're long gone. Nobody's talking about them anymore, and so that's kind of my space. And so even if it's little small tidbits of biography that I uncover about these people, it's more than whatever else is out there.
That's cool. Yeah, and like one of if not the best excuse to ever miss my holiday party this year was you saying I'm going on a research trip. That always fills my heart. I know you do a lot of these, and it's just really cool that
I was sad to miss it though.
yeah, but it's so cool that you take trips and do these investigations. It's really important to me because my next series of questions are about the future of writing and reading. Really, actually, just the future of reading. I'm not concerned about writers. No offense to all of us, but we're not going to stop. It's like a weird thing in our head. Like we just write. It's like but I think most writers, their dream while they're writing is that someone will read what they wrote. My first question is pretty banal and it's quick to answer. But do you feel like there's a difference between listening to a book and reading a book?
An
important difference
for me sometimes, because if I'm writing an essay about a book, I do tend to need to like look at the words on the page, like highlight. I'm often, the way I read a book is literally to have it like on so usually I'll actually scan the book, so I do a digital version of it, so I have it on one screen where I have the text, on the right screen I have my notes, and I'm feverishly writing notes. Sometimes I'm doing full plot summaries so that I can like keep in line with everything that's happening, because it just prevents me from having to read it like 20 times. I just read it once very intensely. So in that aspect, if you're going to write an essay on a book, I do recommend reading it physically and slowly and things like that. But there have also been times, I love audiobooks. I absolutely count them on my reading logs and things like that. I think in many cases, actually, an audiobook enhances the experience with the performance aspect of it to it. So there's a lot of books that I've read that I probably wouldn't have loved as much if I had just picked it up. Whereas I absolutely were obsessed with it as an audiobook. So I know everyone should count, whether it's audiobook or that. But again, if you're going to like really dig deep into it, you probably either want to do it physically or both. Have it.
That's cool. Ways. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great answer. And I totally agree. One of the reasons I ask these questions is I have no time or patience for people who say it doesn't count if you listen to a book. That just really irritates me. I actually can't do it because I have I'm not going to say it's a learning disability, but I'm not good at listening and retaining. So I have to read like the old fashioned way, but I'm jealous. I actually wish, and I can listen to podcasts, so I can listen to people talk, but for some reason, plot or structure or nonfiction doesn't work. And then my other question is, I have many questions, but my next question. So in my weird little like brain space, you're the person who started Red Sands Writers Circle. This group has exploded. I mean, it was you sitting at a table with like 2 people every week, and then it suddenly had 10 people. And the next thing you know, people like me are showing up early, like an open mic event for comedians, and we're signing a sheet because it's the order you sign that you get to go in. And then eventually, and I'm just saying this for our listening audience, you and I split the group the first time, mitosis, into like a morning and an afternoon. Now we have like, I think 7, 8, 9 groups. My point with just throwing all this at you is I consider you almost like the Ezra Pound of Phoenix, like the great like uniter of like all these different people, because it's not just writers, it's poets, artists, writers. I mean, like Red Sands Writer Circle is technically about writing, but even I've started a philosophy offshoot, and it's still gaining popularity. It's on Meetup, by the way, if people listening want to find us, find us. So when you talked about your biography and you're like, no one would want to do it on me, like that alone would be what I would want to do a biography on you about. So I'd like you to just tell me like what drove you to start this group. And then I'd also like you to get a little bit into because I want to inspire people, what it's like to sit at a table at a meetup event that you started and have no one show up. Like I want to answer both those questions
yeah. So I started the group honestly because I am the absolute worst judge of my own writing. Like absolute worst. And this is true not just of writing, but like when I take a test or a quiz, if I leave there feeling super confident, that's a sure sign I failed. If I feel miserable and I, want to, give up, that probably means I aced it. So I've learned that I'm really a bad critic of myself. And it's also lonely, by the way. I don't, for those who are writers, this, but like, it's you and your computer and you're just like, eventually someone's going to read this. But in the meantime, it's like, what's going on? So I really felt I needed a community of people that could help me. It was kind of a selfish thing, I guess. It helped me critique my own work. But I also knew, like, in school, I would do workshops and things like that. And I knew the benefit of all of it. And I also liked how people would get pushed in these creative writing workshops. I felt there was a motivating factor too, because it is very hard to get published. And if you have real aspirations of like getting it out there in a more mass market way, you really need someone to push you and say, yeah, that line doesn't work, or you got to, you need to go back to the drawing board on that. So I found value in that personally. I'm also incredibly socially awkward. And so finding people that were, not that writers are all socially awkward, but that could connect on something, because that's really my only thing. Like writing is my only thing. And so when I talk to people, if they're not a writer, it gets kind of awkward. I don't know what else to say, to be honest. And so having that community, and I think beside from the rows and rows of books that have come out of Red Sands, just that sense of community is something that makes me very emotional when I see these big events, or when I know like every weekend there's 30, 40 people all meeting across different sites in Arizona to do this. I think that aspect is what I do feel maybe the most proud of. But yeah, what did I miss one of your other questions?
No, that was great. And I'm actually glad to hear that gives you a little pride. It really should. That's why I'm like, I was worried that it wouldn't, because it's like so important for me that, like, I mean, I've said this story to too many people, and it's probably annoying people who listen to the podcast regularly, but I was going through a divorce and missing my son, and just going through a world of S when I found your group, and it like literally changed and saved my life. I can't say I was like headed for the gutter and ruin. That's not my personality, but I was like headed to my own rock bottom, and I had no friends, and instantly you and I became friends. And then from that, other people. And so I just think so many other people have come to me and falsely accredited me with starting Red Sands because I run one of the groups. And I always just like they say what I'm saying to you. It's just like, thank you. I needed this place. So I think A, mission accomplished, but B, I really do want you to think about that Ezra Pound idea, because he also wrote and he also was an artist, but he's most known for like finding T.S. Eliot and all that.
Yeah, and Gertrude Stein, was besties with Fitzgerald, and that those writing communities. There's a few that have popped up in history where these great minds get together, and they often produce great works. In fact, not to be another tease, but the biography I'm writing is about a woman who had a writing group as well, and helped produce many incredible writers. And so, first of all, you should give yourself more credit, because starting something is really just a drop in the bucket. You asked about what it's like to be at a group with people or no one is there, and there it's also kind of divine intervention things. There was a time where I think it was maybe our fourth or fifth meeting. It started out like 10 people, and then it went down to like 5, and then we were down to 2. And then one day I showed up and it was just me and nobody was there. And so I waited like 15 minutes and I left. And I said, well, it was going to be kind of the end of the thing. I was like, well, I tried, and then it's over. And then somebody texted me like, hey, I'm just running late. I'm going to be there in a second. Someone else said, oh, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be there in a second. So we came back, there was 3 of us, and then we changed locations, and that was better, and more people started coming up. But if that moment hadn't have happened, if nobody had showed up that last time, we may not have it. I may have said I tried and I gave up. but yeah, it is. I mean, I would also have no friends if it were like all of my friends. There's read literally all of them almost. So it's been important for me as much as I hope it's been important for everybody else. And it's certainly not just me. I run one of the things now, or maybe two or three, but it's really everybody that shows up to and puts in their value and puts themselves out there, because it's incredibly scary. I've been sharing my work for probably 10 years now, and I still get scared. I still get jitters. I still get fearful that people are not going to like it. And I know how scary that can be. But people keep doing it. They keep showing up. They sometimes face harsh criticism, and they get the value in it. And I think that's really important.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was funny when you said how old you were and you said you were 36. I was like, that's not possible. You're in your late 20s. I'm in my mid 30s, because that's when I met you. But you do actually.
That's how we remember each other, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And you haven't aged much. I mean, obviously maturity, obviously, but you look like the same. So it's extra funny to me.
Kind.
Well, yeah, it's true though. Well, thank you, Justin. We're wrapping up the interview. This has been incredible. I did want to ask one last short question, and then I'm going to give you the floor to give whatever message you want to our audience. So my last short question is just, is there a future for pulp fiction? So I'm not talking about writing and books. I'm not talking about Kindle. I just mean like this actual unique genre of like easy, quick written, fun to read beach kind of book that isn't mainstream.
Yeah. So the defining traits of a pulp novel, in my opinion, is it's usually a novella length. They're shorter. They were more focused on selling numerous copies than necessarily a couple. So they're short. They want readers to keep coming back for more. I think that's in. I don't know. I like a short novel still. I think maybe that's also why I gravitate towards the pulp, because they tend to be shorter. I have noticed a trend now is big, like 1,000-pagers, too, in fantasy. So there's room for all books, obviously. But I think the pulp, in the other defining trait, other than just being short, is that they're very over dramatic. I mean, there's murder, there's sex, like all the goods are on the page in a pulp book. And so I think that is in as well. It's kind of a nice escape from reality. So I think kind of like the Gothic, which is very over dramatic and things like that, I think the pulp can probably come back as well, because it's so crazy that it lets you forget about all the real world struggles. So I see it still as a thing. I honestly don't read a lot of modern books. So if somebody's out there that's like they're reading the current trends, they can let me know if I'm wrong on that, or if they have examples that are out there. But I definitely see a desire for me to read it, and I'm having to go back to the 70s to get it. So somebody out there ought to do it now.
That's awesome. The only mistake you made was asking people to find you and give you information, because it's the internet. But no,
maybe don't find me, don't give information. But I'm okay if you going to give me a book recommendation. I mean, yes, it's a mile long, but I will add it to my list. So
that's cool. Yeah, that's sincerely cool. All right. Well, I would like to give you the floor at the end of the interview. Is there anything you want to tell our audience? Usually, people just something inspirational or something motivating, or just something personal. It's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of going back to live your best biography, right? And I think again, I focus on maybe big trailblazers, or not even big. Again, I'm focused on people who aren't famous. So I really like the people who maybe just made slight changes. I recently am researching a chemistry teacher in the 70s, and she also wrote some like poetry and stuff. But I've met people who like remembered her as their teacher, and like tears in their. This is somebody from like 50 years ago, but remembered how like their life would not be the same without it. So if like you're a teacher, if you're a parent, you are living a biography right now that's very important. Your legacy is going to be very important. And so I would just encourage folks to live like somebody is writing your biography, achieve the goals you want, or at least try, do things, and be proud of what you did, because eventually we will die.
That's awesome. Wow.
And that's the spirit of your show, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
No, dark when I say that. Okay.
No, definitely not. No. Plus you're awesome, and look at your background. I mean, you're into Gothic.
Yeah. By the way, I am permanently spooky. This is my Gothic. So if you're wondering, like, is it Halloween right now? It is always Halloween in my office. That's what's going on here, by the way.
No, it's awesome. It's great. And you do throw the best Halloween parties of any person I've ever met. So, well, Justin, thank you so much. That answer was really awesome, because it really does set up, like, we live in this Andy Warhol 15-minute minutes of fame society, and I think young people when they're polled, they say fame is worth more than money and worth more than anything else. So it's interesting that if you twist the definition of fame into like the difference you make among people, teachers can be famous. Like, and so I like that. That's a really warm,
teachers
good
are probably, if that's the definition of fame, teachers are the most famous people in the world because they have the most impact that anybody can possibly have.
Yeah, seriously. Forget about politics. Forget about anything else. Just go teach 6 sections of 30 kids a day.
Right? Yeah, 100 kids a day, helping them push themselves and achieve their goals and learn things. Like, there is nothing more important.
That's awesome. My brother is the producer and editor of this podcast, and he makes edit comments. He's a teacher, so guaranteed that this section is staying in. No, but for real. Thank you so much, Justin. It's been a great interview. For everyone who's watching at home, once again, you have been listening or watching Coffin Talk Interviews with the Living. My name is Mike Oppenheim, and the best way to support the show is to head over to my website, mikeyop.com or coffintalkpodcast.com, and sign up for the free weekly essays that I write, which are usually humorous or sad or both, but I promise they won't drag you down. They'll actually lift you up. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Justin, and we will see ya soon.